was in the year of 1954. He said, "I killed a man because he made me sore. I took his money, put his body in the trunk of the car, and proceeded to dump his body in an oil sump where I knew they would never find his body. I killed him with my fists. I didn't think I had that much power in my punches. I got rid of his car by selling it in Tijuana, Mexico, for $250. Chapter 1. Charlene and Gerald Gallego returned to California long before July 17th. They continued to drive the gold and white van with green and blue paintings on the white portion between the side windows. She continued to live in a world which did not approach reality. Sometimes she smoked pot to make Jerry happy. He smoked pot, and when he did, she joined him because he demanded it. Charlene preferred speed or cocaine, both uppers, and justified them with the same rationalization when she used either. They were needed to make life with Jerry possible. That's so sad. She needed them to keep going at work and in her daily life. So, still employed by the food distributor, Charlene's relationship with her immediate superior was rapidly deteriorating. Married to an incredible chauvinist, she either was or believed herself to be working for one. Employed as the only woman in a marketing capacity on his staff, she thought he had never wanted her, and although her contribution was obvious, she felt a resentment in him and hostility throughout their association. At business meetings, and there were more of those meaningless and humdrum affairs than she cared to remember, she felt that she was expected to keep her place, a woman's place, in which she should listen and not talk. Her opinions, when she offered them, she believed were resented. Also, contributing to her deteriorating position with the firm was her increasing dependence on drugs. She was often, sometimes because of Jerry, late for a business appointment, and in one instant at least, in Winnemucca, had visited a client in cami clothes. The Winnemucca experience was not like Charlene. Regardless of her mental or physical condition, her appearance will always be as nearly flawless as possible under any ordinary circumstances. And really quick, I wanted to pause. I don't know if you care or even notice, but I'm ready for bed. I'm ready to go to sleep. And I was just about to go to sleep. And I'm very, 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 very sleepy. So if you can tell that I seem a little sleepy, it's because I kind of am. Anyway, here I go. And then literally right after I turn this camera off, I'm going to bed. So, going on. So this woman's life is basically falling apart because of Jerry. She had traveled back to Wood Hollow Drive, the duplex in Sacramento, with Jerry through a world of distant images, over US 101, down California's Redwood Highway, and over to the valley, stopping overnight at a motel in a location she couldn't remember, watching scenery roll like a silent motion picture past the big windows of the van. They made impressions in her memory without leaving reference points. There was no mention, after Jerry's display of emotion at the old Navarro Inn, of the Gold Beach murder. The ghost of Linda Aguilar was a member of a growing but refuge she found in an alcoholic haze, she didn't find it as pleasant as the coke or speed, which uplifted her spirits while she was on them, rather than plunging her into inevitable depression. Often, she and Jerry went on fishing expeditions along the banks of the Sacramento River, finding remote areas his friends or the clientele at the bar had told him about. Basically, the fishing trips were nightmares, as Charlene knew nothing about fishing before meeting Jerry, but it was she who got the fish when they went and got fished, fishing, all the things. And with each one, he became like more pissed off and more angry, more increasingly angry. So he was just mad that she had all of the luck. They drank more than they fished, which is like usually what happens. But they usually had vodka and just like out of plastic cups that they kept in the van, literally for that purpose. The night of July 17th was a bad one. Neither Jerry nor Charlene caught any keepers. What fish did bite were small, striped bass, which were illegal. It was early evening when they went to the river, and Charlene was several months pregnant. As the fishing grew increasingly bad, Jerry drank more and more and demanded that she share him drink for drink. In her condition, the booze nauseated her. So Charlene vomited as they approached the van, and the baby, the booze, and the cold were all too much for her. The riverbank was eerie in the gathering gloom. So she's just leaning against the van, sick, and a little more like drunk than she needs to be, obviously. At all. She doesn't need to be drunk at all. And she's just waiting for this outburst from Jerry. And she knew that he would freak out because Jerry didn't like when people were sick. His reaction was unexpected, however. He drove silently in a short distance, then stopped the van and got out, pacing back and forth in a gathering darkness. She followed him, and he was crying, caught in a conclusive, emotional jag. "Baby, I'm no good for you," he sobbed. You just don't know what I'm doing to you. I'm just not good enough for you. You should find somebody better." He continued a raving confession while he sobbed, admitting the relationship with Evelyn, detailing his infidelity while she listened, holding him in her arms and murmuring little consoling phrases. "It's all right, honey. I know. I understand." She didn't know, but she thought she understood. She held him in her arms and let him cry, and while he sobbed, continued to console him. This woman is out of her. I'm sorry, I've already read this, but like, when reading this again, like, okay. So, there was a ring back at the house and an exclusive trinket she had bought that day for his birthday, and somehow the ring was burning Jerry's confession into her memory. If there had been suspicions, there had been no real knowledge that another woman was in Jerry's life, and she didn't want to hear the details, didn't want to know, but he kept talking, and she told him softly that she didn't care and that it was all right. And as they walked arm in arm outside the van, she said, "I love you, Jerry." Ooh, gross. He kept on talking about lying to her and cheating on her, and Charlene asked him if he was in love with the other woman. Still sobbing, he said he was not, but that Evelyn was so much in love with him that she had attempted suicide when she learned about his marriage to her. The second marriage, as Stephen a File. The confession continued as they walked back and forth over the dusty surface of the rich loam of the delta beside the van on the back road pullout. All the while, she consoled him, telling him about the ring which had been made especially for him, saying, "I love you, Jerry. I sail in. The sail in. They walked inside and ordered a Black Russian for her and some tequila for Jerry. And before long, he was talking shop with another bartender, telling him he was about to move from one Sacramento tavern to another and playing pool. He hardly seemed to notice the other bartender at all. She chatted with Charlene between serving drinks, moving back and forth as her work demanded, checking on her clientele and stopping now and then for a few words. She was a slender woman in her mid-30s, although she looked younger, blonde and pretty, reminding Charlene a little of one of her high school friends. Jerry became involved with the male bartender and a group of his friends who had been a frog giggling along the riverbank nearby. Charlene played a game of pool with him and introduced him to her newfound friend. The evening began to blur a little for Charlene, the male bartender playing pool with Jerry, and eventually went off shift, and the conversation with the lady bartender continued sporadically, and Charlene noticed a little man in a work shirt at the end of the bar who reminded her of Jerry's stepfather. The evening wore on, and just about everybody shot pool with Jerry, and pretty soon only the two of them were left in the tavern, and the lady bartender was cleaning things, washing glasses, polishing them, replacing bottles, and taking care of all the little chores required at the end of the shift. It was 2 o'clock, closing time, and Charlene went to the bathroom before they left, and when she returned, Jerry was muttering softly so that the lady bartender could hear, and saying something about, we could take this joint off her, and we could take this joint off, and her too. So I guess he's kind of saying, like, we could rob this place as well as take this girl. He had said that earlier, and she thought he was kidding, and then he said it again, and when he returned from the bathroom, she just shook her head thinking he was out of his mind and said, Jerry, come on, don't be crazy, look at this, there's people outside. Then she talked about David, Jerry's brother, who was still doing time for the armed robbery, and remembered the stories Jerry had told her about committing robberies and how he and David had been careful at first and then began robbing places on the spur of the moment, and it was their carelessness which led them to their arrest. He told her that they had let their guard down. She said, man, you're just getting crazy, getting reckless. But she got him outside and then remembered she had left her coat inside. Oh man, my coat's inside. Well, go ahead and get it, he ordered. She went to the door of the tavern, which was locked by then, and knocked, calling the bartender by name. Virginia asked where it was, and then brought the coat to the door, unlocking it and handing it to her, while Charlene told her how nice it was to meet her and thanked her. They were back at the van, ready to leave, with Jerry still muttering about how he could take the place and bartender too. He was out of his mind, she thought. Drunk and crazy, and all of the drinks made no difference anymore to her. Everything was still blurred and pushed into a strange kaleidoscope, but she knew this was wrong and crazy because there were still people standing around the parking lot, talking about frog gigging and pool and a lot of other things. So, they were loud, the people. They were really loud. And then suddenly they were gone and the van was moving. And Charlene thought it was over, that they were going home. And then everything would be alright. Then the woman was outside, locking the door at the window of the bartender's car, and she was just sitting in the car by then, looking at Jerry through this partly opened window. Then Jerry was opening the door, and the woman stepped out, and he and the lady bartender started walking toward the door. Charlene jumped out of the van then. She ran over to the woman's car and wiped clean the door handle. Now we're on to chapter 2. So, sorry, I was just checking to make sure no one was gonna. Shh. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. She's the most talkative cat you'll ever meet in your entire life. Anyway, so, chapter 2. Charlene couldn't believe what she was doing and what she was seeing. Jerry, with the gun in his hand, and the woman were standing under the light in front of the door, clearly visible. They talked, and then it got into the back of the van. There was more talk. Jerry was saying she couldn't get into the bar if she wanted to, and the woman was telling him there was a key that only worked one way, and that when she locked up, only another person could open the door. Virginia continued talking then about her children and a girlfriend or a babysitter. Charlene couldn't be sure. The woman was begging Jerry to please let her call the girlfriend or babysitter, and then talking more about the children. The woman was sitting in the back and Charlene in the passenger seat, and Jerry was driving. A small car entered the parking lot as they left, and Charlene heard herself asking Virginia if it was the girlfriend or the babysitter. They drove up on the freeway then, on I-80, and headed east, and Charlene asked Jerry where they were going. Back to Wood Hollow, he answered. Then Charlene was driving, and Jerry was in back with the woman with the gun in his hand, and she kept talking about her children while Jerry had bound her hands and feet. Charlene and Jerry changed seats again, and the van moving on the freeway. The gun was on the floor in the front of them. Jerry was telling the woman to shut up, but she only kept quiet for a while, and then she would start talking again about her kids, and it was always about her children. He told her again to shut up or he would kill her, but that didn't stop the woman. "Why don't you just go ahead and kill me now then?" she asked. Then she started talking again about her kids. It seemed to Charlene that all she could talk about were her kids. "Well, Jerry, what are you gonna do?" Charlene asked. "Take her over to the house." "No, Jerry, you're not taking her inside the house. You're not gonna take her inside the house, not my house. You're not gonna take her inside the house. That's stupid, Jerry." "Well, now I'm just gonna keep her out here in the van, and you just go inside the house." Charlene heard herself saying, "Yeah, okay." She couldn't believe what was happening. She was disgusted, totally disgusted, and she was supposed to sit in the house and listen. She went inside and sat by the window in the rocking chair, and she could hear not what was being said, but a woman's voice, someone talking. The sounds in the car reminded her of a man and a woman having a fight. She opened the door and she called to him. "Jerry, what are you doing?" "I can hear you do all the way up in the house." She picked up the cat and sat down, watching an old motion picture on the television, trying to keep her mind on something. She was confused. She was disgusted, thinking about Jerry's fantasy and him bringing it home, and that everything was gone. Nothing meant anything anymore. Not anything. It was all destroyed. These thoughts reeled through her mind, pushing her away. Her consciousness of her surroundings, the cat in her lap, the television set, the woman in the car, and the sounds of all this arguing with Jerry. They were all somewhere else, far, far away. While she struggled with the thought, the very real knowledge that everything was gone. Everything. The door opened softly, and he walked in, and she was drawn from her grim revere by his voice. Come on, let's go." was still playing, and when they left the house, she opened the van door and sat in the passenger seat, and Virginia was in the back. My God, Charlene thought, she's in the back. It was dark in the front of the van, but in the back where the woman was where she was at, it was light out. Everything seemed to be illuminated, and she was there, whimpering, repeating the same phrase over and over again. Just kill me. Why don't you just go ahead and kill me? Kill me now. She had been raped, and she didn't want to live any longer. So she was just kind of lying on her back, and she was on the bed where 7 girls and young women had rested before they died. And Charlene couldn't see her, not really, but somehow she would see her in a strange sort of light that wasn't real, not real at all. And the woman was lying there on her back. Charlene heard herself complaining, "I could hear you, Jerry, all the way inside." For some reason, that seat in the distance was gone, or the second dispassionate Charlene who watched in the distance wasn't there, or couldn't detach herself while she listened in a daze to Jerry explain they had to take Virginia back, all the way back to West Sacramento, near the tavern where she worked. The van was moving then through the darkness, the deep darkness, while the woman in the back kept telling Jerry to go ahead and kill her and talked about her children. My kids. Charlene heard over and over, and then Virginia was begging Jerry to kill her again. Jerry, God, I just can't take it. Charlene burst out. Jerry told the woman to shut up. Then he was telling Charlene he was taking the woman to a place where they had fished in the past. He was still driving, and they had not traded seats. He turned off the freeway to a road she would not forget, a road she looked at every day. Forever after that, it seemed, out to a branch of the river, the deep water channel beyond Freeport, to a place where the road curved and rose at the same time. And then Jerry was giving orders. Get over in the driver's seat. He told Charlene he was going to go back and kill the woman, and to turn the sound volume of the radio high to drown out the noise he would be making. Just don't turn around, he said when he had climbed into the rear of the van. The curtain is closed. Then she was alone in the front of the darkness with the radio blaring and the woman's voice playing a broken record in her memory. Just kill me. Why don't you just kill me now? And that was what Jerry was doing. He was back there killing her as she had asked. There was no gunshot. Jerry had learned on Gold Beach just 1 month and 10 days earlier how easy it was to strangle a woman. He didn't need a gun, or a hammer, or Charlene. Only his hands, the evil hands, which had fondled and abused a 6-year-old girl when they were only 12, that had violated his own daughter when she was a little more than a baby. Charlene drove on through the darkness, knowing this was a curve ahead because of the surface of the road was made of rocks instead of dirt as it bordered the water. There was a house not far away. All of that recorded itself on her motion picture memory as the van traveled on very, very slowly while Jerry, through his sanguinary labors, peeked back through the curtains at the prone and now silent figure on the bed while he ordered Charlene to slow down and get back on the other road. He asked Charlene if she could turn the van around, and when she said she was not sure, he changed places with her and made the turn, and they were not moving again, and now they were moving again, with her in the passenger seat and thinking that the woman was dead in the back. God, Jerry, she said, and then she asked a perfunctory question. I don't know what that means, perfunctory. She's dead. Yeah, she's dead. She thought about the gun, the .357 Python he kept in the holster. He had fired the Python at the riverside when they were fishing. He liked to shoot guns. Eventually, his enjoyment of gunfire would have a profound effect on his life. But that was in the distant future, in the life of a man who could only see a few moments ahead. shooter? Charlene inquired. It was easy like the other one, he said. Then he was talking about getting rid of Virginia, saying he had to find some place to get rid of her. So Charlene's just kind of thinking over and over in her head how crazy it was that he just did this so easily. So Jerry had broken her hyoid bone, which is basically the bone that connects to your tongue, and inevitably this breaks. It's a byproduct of strangulation, so the cops knew that. She stopped the van on Jerry's orders and the curtains flapped when she heard the door open, and she got another glimpse, just a glimpse of the open door and a part of Virginia's leg. She heard a thump then, a god-awful thump. Charlene got out of the van then and saw Jerry just walking off to the side of the road, coming up out of the riverbed. The bartender was gone. They drove back then to Wood Hollow Drive, where there was a lot of cleaning. A big job of disposing of evidence which would last for some time into the future. Charlene remembered that Jerry was impatient while she was cleaning the van. He was remembering it was a special day for him. "You're not gonna fuck this up," he warned. "You're not gonna fuck up my birthday party." He sounds like a spoiled teenager. So now I'm just looking at chapter 3. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. I can hear my kitty again. Give me just a second. Okay. 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 So for chapter 3, it kind of... Here, let me put my other one in. So it kind of starts by their travels back after they got rid of Virginia. So it now was becoming daylight and they started to drive back. And Jerry was kind of going crazy on Charlene, saying things like, get yourself together, even though he was like losing it. He kept saying, "We have to go back, we have to change our minds. She might be alive. I think she's still alive." And he was also super, super worried about the fact that he used his fishing line from his fishing pole. And then they remembered that Charlene had to go back to work that morning, so they had to hustle. They had to make it seem like nothing ever happened. So Charlene was just like, "Jerry, just leave her alone, for F's sake, you've done enough, he's so sick, leave her alone." So then they're headed back to Wood Hollow. He told her to go back inside and try to get some sleep, and he kept talking about going back to move the body all the way home and into the morning until she left for her job in Hayward. One of the endless sales meetings was scheduled for that day, and Charlene's Oldsmobile was in the shop. She had been the last car in the 5-car pileup a few days earlier, and the silver blue sedan was being repaired. Jerry was outside to see her off, warning her about the van. "Just don't let anybody inside the van," he was warning her. That was the day of all days when the people at the office were short of cars. One of the women and a man had offered her to stow some material that were needed for the meeting in the van. So she found an excuse and somehow managed to load the sample sales without any volunteers. When she returned to Sacramento that night, back from a 200-mile round trip to Hayward, Jerry told her that he had returned to the river that day, and he looked as he drove past, and had not been able to see the body. He just couldn't stop, he said, because there was someone fishing in a boat just off the bank. Jerry explained he had borrowed her mother's car to make the trip. That evening, when he arrived home, she found the fishing poles were still in the van, but it was not the poles Jerry had been afraid someone would see. and the fishing line that he had used to tie the woman had been from their reels. All of the time, she was cleaning the van, and Jerry was changing the line on the reels and getting rid of Virginia's clothes and jewelry. Charlene kept thinking that the woman was a lot like her, and some of the jewelry had looked like Charlene's. She had been wearing a pair of slacks, which were some that she actually owned, and in so many ways she reminded Charlene of herself, so much that she was frightened. Having seen Jerry kill, the thought that he might kill her was always tucked away in her mind. Seeing the woman so much like her and the things she owned so much like hers made the possibility more of a probability. She was still thinking about that a week later when she returned from work to Wood Hollow and Jerry greeted her with the message. "The police called here today," he said. "They left a message for you." Charlene was startled. Jerry had warned the police might get mixed up in the Yolo County episode, but the message surprised her. The police had not been near them, not ever. "What do they want?" she inquired. "They just want to talk to you," Jerry said. "A detective. His name's Trujillo," or something like that. So that's it for chapter 3. Now to chapter 4. At 4 o'clock in the morning of July 18th, Bill Cannon, a regular at the Sail Inn, drove past the place and noticed that Virginia Mocho's car was still on the lot. He didn't see any lights in the place, but stopped and knocked on the door anyway. No one answered his knock. He nosed around the car a little bit, and the window was down on the driver's side, and that wasn't like Virginia, he thought. She didn't take chances. He looked around a little more and then went home. 2 or 3 of the Sail Inn regulars had dropped by after closing and noticed the parked car in the lot. Each of them saw the window rolled down and thought that it was unlike Virginia. But after knocking at the door of the tavern and not getting an answer, they decided Virginia might have gone off to breakfast with some friends. And, she did that now and then. She would not have left with a man, though. There wasn't any clue that she did, and that wasn't really like her style. She was an attractive woman, and there was not one of her male clients who didn't speculate on her ability as a bed partner now and then. But Virginia didn't encourage one of them. She knew she couldn't work behind the bar. If word got out, she was an easy mark. Instinct, the raw hunch, which is always a part of this work, told Dave Trujillo and Rick Mayoral, Yolo County Sheriff deputies, that the investigation into the disappearance of Virginia Mocho would probably end on a downbeat. They sensed tragedy. Experience whispered in morbid tones, telling them that the lady bartender at the Sail Inn would not be found alive. Thousands of people were reported missing in the country every day, and they demand different treatment and are viewed by the officers who take the reports with varying degrees of urgency. A husband known for alcoholic Saturday night celebrations would get instant attention when reported missing. The officers will stretch the records of the local hospitals, accident reports, and drunk arrests, and 90% of the time produce the missing man. A housewife reported missing by her husband may well have left a note behind, which he has not revealed, telling him she has finally found a man who doesn't snore. Since runaway wives are not breaking any law, searching for them and finding them is more often than not a waste of the department's time. That's kind of shitty. But missing children require and get instant attention and are included in this all-out search effort by every available officer. And so do missing mothers as well. The babysitter for the children of Virginia Mocho, night shift bartender at the Sail Inn in West Sacramento, showed remarkable restraint when she waited until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of the 17th to report the lady missing. At 34, Virginia Mocho had carved a little place for herself in the Yolo County community across the river from the state capital. She was the slender, petite, pretty, personable, and vivacious woman. She was interested in her customers and easy to talk to, She never got the recipe for a French 75 mixed up with that of a Black Russian. She was a good bartender and had developed a following. So when the babysitter did call the Yolo County Sheriff's Department, she told him Virginia had not returned home from work that morning and that her children had not heard from her and that the behavior was completely out of character for the missing woman. So the officer went to the Sail Inn and spoke with the day bartender, who told him Virginia had relieved her at 6 o'clock the previous evening, was in good spirits and apparently in good health. She had been wearing this pair of faded slacks, a pink and white tank top, and sandals. Her car was still parked in the downwards lot with this, passenger window down, like we were saying. A close friend reported Virginia would never have left her car unlocked and certainly wouldn't have left any kind of window down, especially wouldn't have left her children not unattended, but just, without any arrangements made, and just not show up. So this was all very weird. So Virginia's daughter, a mature 12-year-old, told the officer she was frightened and worried about her mother. She had talked to her in the afternoon before she went to work, and Virginia had been happy, healthy, and said nothing about, getting home late or anything like that. So the patrol officers made all of the right moves. They procured a photograph of the missing woman, checked all hospitals and coroner's offices for possible chain toes, and broadcast a bulletin describing Virginia and the circumstances of her disappearance. But this remained a missing persons case. Dave and Rick were assigned to investigate the case, though. They found Bill Cannon. He considered Virginia a personal friend, a confidant, sister, confessor, and counselor. Often at night, he waited until 2 o'clock closing to escort her to her car. A woman couldn't be too careful, even in West Sacramento, maybe particularly in West Sacramento, which is crowded with motels and hotels, some of them aging and getting a little run down at the edges, which cater to travelers who have business somewhere in the vast honeycomb across the river, which houses the heart of the California state government. Vince Khalil was another who often checked to see that Virginia was safely in her car when she left the bar at closing time. There were half a dozen fellows who had been frogging that night. They were there early, and then they returned right after Virginia closed. When they knocked on the door, she had told them friendly that the bar was closed. Then she opened the door just a crack to examine and admire their frogs. Virginia was like that. She was nice, but no fool. Like most neighborhood bars, the Sail Inn didn't entertain many strangers. When Dave and Rick began tracking down the folks who were there on the night of the 17th, they didn't have much trouble locating most of them. The Froggers had found their game along the banks of one of the sloughs near Clarksburg, which is a little less than a whistle and a whoop from Freeport. That became important and ominous later that fall. Most of the Froggers were regulars at the bar, but one, a Yolo County fireman, didn't get there much, and he had arrived with a couple of other firemen who visited the bar often, though. Another Frogger guy didn't like him, and he regarded him as this sleazy type and kind of raunchy, foul mouth, and he liked dirty jokes. He sounds like me. If I was suspicious of anyone, it would be him. One of the regulars told Dave Trio. They all remembered a white-haired man, maybe 65 years old, and they hadn't seen him before. He was like this kind of little argumentative loudmouth man, and he seemed to have another view on almost everything than the younger regulars at the Sail Inn did and what they discussed, and nobody liked him really, so they kind of seemed like this might be a good guy to inspect. Bill Cannon worked for Sacramento Convention Center and got off work around midnight. He usually stopped by the Sail Inn on the way home and didn't get out of the place a lot of the time before 2 o'clock closing hour. He had appointed himself to a top position in Virginia's closing hour guard. Bill told Dave he had noticed a couple at the bar who seemed to know some of the folks there. They both shot some bull, although the man spent more time at the pool table than the woman, who mainly just sat there and chatted with Virginia when she was available. He also noted that he didn't like Jerry. share a drink with her, or that she wouldn't share a drink with him. He goes on to say he was kind of upset because Virginia wouldn't have a drink. He said, that a bartender should sample the drinks with the customers. Virginia said she didn't have to do that. She said she had her regular customers who came in and she didn't have to drink because she didn't want to drink anymore, Cannon reported. Cannon also said he and the guy shot a game of pool. I'm no bullshitter, and he was pretty good, but if I was just killing time, so I finally shot him at a game of pool, and he kept talking that he was from Texas, he added. Cannon said when it was time to leave, he didn't want to leave Virginia there with just this weird couple, the strangers. He remembered seeing the older man and hadn't thought much about him. The bullshooter really bothered him, aka Jerry. So he says, I felt apprehensive about the gentleman who said he was from Texas who was shooting pool. He seemed kind of cocky, and he was upset that Virginia didn't drink with him. So later on, he saw that Virginia's car was still in the parking lot, and then he got super concerned about her. So later on, this elderly man was located by Dave. He told him he had been at the sale in once or twice before, but not often, and he didn't live in West Sacramento, but he visited Sacramento regularly on business. So they ended up rolling this guy out, and then later on, Dave talked to the man who had been tending bar with Virginia earlier in the evening. He explained that he had been just kind of helping out a friend to take care of this temporary rush type thing. So he was gonna go change jobs and do a different bar, but he was just helping out Virginia. Trujillo found Stephen Files' telephone number and called the house, aka Jerry. File himself answered. He remembered being in the sale inn, but not very much, confessing he had too much to drink to remember. His wife, Charlene, would know more about the evening, so Dave left a message for her to call, because Jerry didn't remember anything. So Charlene did end up returning Trujillo's call on the evening of July 23rd, and the conversation was brief. She said she and her husband, Stephen, had been at the Sail Inn bar that night after an evening of fishing. She said they had both been drinking, and she could not remember much of what happened. How are you going to be so pregnant and not even remember? I can't. I just can't. So, as Dave and Rick traced through Virginia Mojo's past, they discovered she had been married, and the parting with her husband had been stormy. He had just before the breakup visited the bar where she was working and thrown a stool through the window. She had him arrested for disturbing the peace, and he had punctuated his marriage with a period. End of paragraph. Mayoral talked with the husband, and the man said he had no bad feelings about Virginia and that they were now friends. Another man with whom Virginia had maintained a continuing relationship for the past 3 years was also questioned by Dave and Rick. He said that they had been closer a couple years ago at the time of her disappearance. collection of motels and then Bluebird Lane. She back home to Burindo Drive. The van was sold. So Jerry was living sporadically with Evelyn Smith by then, and he had checked her in at the Ambassador Inn for a while, visited Cal Expo, where the state fair was in progress at the end of August, and then returned to the motel frightened and agitated at 3 a.m. and said it was time to move. So Evelyn packed everything up really quickly, and they woke up in another motel the next day. October 2nd, a fisherman walking along the riverbank near Freeport saw something strange in the water. A brief inspection of his find sent him to the village, where he called the Yolo County Sheriff's Department. Dave Trujillo examined the body, what was left of it. The pretty bartender at the sail inn was no longer pleasing to the eye. She had been left nude on the riverbank, wearing only a couple of rings and some fishing line which bound her arms behind her back. Fishing line, frogging, and fishing. Trio remembered some people who had been at the sail inn on the 17th who had gone frogging, but there were 2 who had been fishing. So he found his log and checked back through the months to July. So Stephen and Charlene had been fishing early in the evening on the 17th before they visited the sail inn. So Dave called Charlene and discovered she had moved, located her, and asked her to drop into the Yolo County Sheriff's Substation on 3rd Street in Broderick, just across the river from Sacramento. He explained that would save her a trip to Woodland. Charlene did not provide much information. She was cooperative and articulate, and she didn't give too many bad vibes. So she answered all the questions that she could, and she remembered like the froggers. They were loud and noisy. She remembered them playing pool and being annoying. Charlene had trouble remembering details though. She was candid with the detectives, and she said, "I was pretty far gone myself," she admitted. "How did you get home?" Trujillo asked. "I drove home," Charlene replied. "Jiminy, how did you get home? The way you said the other." Charlene was sitting in that chair talking to the detective, the distant observer, cool, impassive, intelligent, perceptive. The gifted child, now a woman who saw but never acted, who watched without emotion. She had sat in the wings of the morbid stage and watched Jerry and his wife had recited their lines and played leading roles in a macabre. So her reply to Trio was nothing but this. She said, "By the grace of God." So that's how she drove home. By the grace of God. So that is it for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed and have a beautiful night. And we will see you guys in the next one. I hope you are doing very, 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 very